particularly, I think particularly of the book's work as a spiritual practice and aging as a spiritual practice. He's actually truly a man of parts. He's also not just a Zen teacher and an author, but also a musician and a composer, as well as a kind of a editor and mentor to other authors, and a very fine pianist and composer with 4 CDs to his name and a DVD. He's really a very sort of serious and fine musician and a software engineer and entrepreneur. So really a most, remarkable guy. It's a real honor that he's with us. I'm going to just read a tiny little bit from the book we're going to hear from tonight, which is very recent book. I think it was mid or late 2020, if I'm right, in its publication. Every Breath, New Chances, How to Age with Honor and Dignity, a guide for men. So I'm hoping Lewis may find a way to include the many women and whatever non-binaries in our Sangha. So please, very interesting to hear. But of course, we have quite a few men too. So it'd be very interesting to hear how that comes across. But listen to this, folks. If I were to measure my current stature and standing in the world, I would have to say that I'm dwindling, becoming smaller, less visible. But as a lifelong Buddhist steeped in the worldview of that legacy of knowledge and belief, I realize that this state of affairs is written into the fabric of the universe. I am living the teaching that the Buddha taught. All things fade and pass away, including our physical body, which actually performs miraculously decade after decade with hardly any attention from us. Beautiful. Now, I've got one more little thing I want you to listen to, if my technical expertise is up to it. Just 1 second. Ding, 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 ding. Are you still hearing me okay? Are you still hearing me? Yeah, okay, so here we go. Wait, sorry. That is an original composition. Isn't that beautiful? And an original, I think, played by Lewis. Very, very beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us, Lewis, and sharing your wisdom with us. Over to you.
Henry, thank you very much. Thank you for the very nice introduction. Can everybody hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah. I'm actually not going to preach about my latest book per se, although I am going to actually give you a practice that's from the book, which I invented, called Deep Mind Reflection. It's kind of a visualization practice. I developed it specifically for men, but part of why I'm not going to talk about the book per se is because I know that a lot of you are women or some other gender, and I want to include everybody. What I would like to talk about, and what's been very much on my mind, and probably all of yours, is illness, sickness. And I'll kind of weave the book in as I go. We've all been through an unprecedented year on the whole planet of illness and fear of illness. A terrible disease that, even though I noticed in the announcements that, people who are vaccinated can come to the zendo and show your certificates. I think in this country, we've done very well. This miraculous vaccination, only in the 21st century can science create something so valuable to save so many lives. But as I speak, as you all know, some countries, in particular India, is catastrophically suffering from this. No one knows how many millions and millions and millions of people have died there, or tens of millions who are ill. There's no way to, in all the villages, India is a huge country. And when I read about that and I think about it, I think of the Buddha who lived in that place. And the way that life was in the 5th century BC in India was terrible. Life expectancy was 30. People were dying all the time. People were ill. You remember the Buddha left his palace and his privilege as a prince to go out into the world. And the first thing he saw was a sick person. And the fairy tale says about his life says he'd never seen a sick person before. Well, psychologically, that's mythic. What it means is, we all see sick people and we all know about sickness, but there's a moment in our life, maybe when it's ourselves that become ill, seriously ill, or someone that we love, and it hits us like a freight train. And we suddenly realize a lot of things. Our body is fragile. Everything that we love is fragile. Everything that around us will age and pass away. And the life story of the Buddha is a universal story of awakening of every human being. I myself have suffered a couple of extremely serious illnesses. The latest one, about 20 years ago, I fell into a coma with a brain infection and nobody thought I would live. I was conscious inside that coma. I had no awareness of the outside world, but I was conscious and I had visions, numerous visions. And people have asked me later, well, did your Buddhist practice help you in this diet? And I woke up and I had brain damage. It took me a couple of years. It was really hard. And particularly as a man, and I write about this a lot in the book because men are in particular tend to be identify their ego with their work, with their capabilities, with their competency. My identity as a man was shattered. I couldn't do anything for a long time. As Henry said, I made a living as a software developer, had my own company. But my brain was damaged and I was terrified that I wouldn't be able to do it, that I would lose my livelihood, that I would lose my house, that I would lose everything. There's an old doctrine in the Theravada tradition called the 5 Great Fears. These were developed by monks, and listen to what they are. The first one is the fear of dying, fear of death. The second one is the fear of illness. The third one is the fear of going crazy, unusual states of mind or dementia. The fourth one is fear of loss of livelihood. I had really all 4 of those. The fifth one I won't go into. For some bizarre reason, it's the fear of public speaking. But these were monks in more than 2,000 years ago who clearly had all these human experiences that we're having today. And I feel that the year of COVID, we live such comfortable lives in America. We live like princes. We live a life way better than Gautama when he was a prince in the palace. We live the life of kings, many of us anyway. And suddenly, it was like my sudden brain infection. Suddenly, everybody on the planet is faced with a dire illness and the possibility of becoming very ill, not being able to breathe, and dying alone in a hospital. And we read about these things. And I feel like suddenly we were thrust into the matrix or the womb out of which Buddhism came. Buddhism, the Buddha developed his teaching, his awakening was how do we as human beings survive and take care of each other and love and have contentment in the face of such a thing. I remember once Suzuki Roshi was talking about, he was sent during World War II, he was sent to Manchuria as a priest, as a chaplain in the last days of the war in the jungle. And when he got there, they told him there were tigers living in the forest. And he said, I was so happy that there were tigers, because if you live in a place where there are tigers, you really can practice, So he understood that the real source of Buddha's teaching is in this realm of shadow, in this realm of fear and terror and illness, people dying all the time. I'm sure you all know the famous story in the sutras, the mustard seed, the woman who came to the Buddha with a child who had died. She said, I hear you're a man of miracles, and I want you to bring my child back to life, because I can't live this way. I can't live with this dead child. He said, okay, I'll do that. But first of all, I want you to go around in the village and get a mustard seed from any household that hasn't had a death. You all know this story? It's very famous. And so the woman did that. And she came back to the Buddha and she said, there is no such household. Every household I visited had had a death. And he said, that's my teaching for you. You can have another child. And for a long time, I just read that story, great fairy tale, wonderful. But I realized, wait a minute, this is serious. Every household in that ancient town had somebody who had died, kind of like today. I wouldn't say every household in America has had a death, but they've done surveys, and an astonishingly large number of people knew somebody who had COVID, had serious COVID. And you can imagine what it's like in Brazil or India or any of those places. So, in the last 10 years or so, I've kind of retired from active Zen teaching. I've handed over my group to my successor, and I've been writing and teaching in that way. And I've come to feel that aging itself, as Henry read the quote from my book, that aging itself is Dharma. Basically, the Buddhists taught, you can go to Sunday school in Buddhism and find out that Buddhism teaches that everything changes. That's kind of a shrug. Okay, everything changes, I get that. But when you say everything ages, particularly when you're older, like many of you, like me, that's a different ball of wax. Then you suddenly realize, wait a minute, I'm going to die. Could be tomorrow, a lot of us in this modern society who have good medical care don't really take it seriously that we could die tomorrow. But when COVID came, I don't know about all of you, but every night I went to bed with my wife And I had read news stories and I wondered, is today going to be the day that we have to call 911 and one of us goes to the hospital and we never see each other again? I mean, that's like a tiger, you know, there's no way of getting around that. You could meditate till you're blue in the face for 1,000 years and you won't be faced with the real challenge that Buddha put to us. But so I think we are, we're coming out of it, at least in this country, but we're scarred, we're traumatized. And from the standpoint of Dharma, from the standpoint of practice, that's not entirely a bad thing. Because I remember, I listened to Henry give, the meditation instruction at the beginning where he said, settle yourself in your lower body, the ground. Illness and old age are the ground of the teaching. And everything flows from that. So it's always, I think, a good idea. And part of the reason I wrote another book for men is that men have a somewhat harder time with some of this for various reasons. And I created a practice, a kind of a combination of Jungian free association and Tibetan visualization and Zen koan. It's kind of a mix. I call deep mind reflection. And although I developed it as a simple tool for men who read the book, whether they're familiar with meditation or not, I assumed a lot of them weren't, something simple enough that they could do that would get them closer to their ground, closer to reality, closer to what's really going on. So I'm going to do this with you. I'll first of all explain briefly what the practice is. And it has bits and pieces of lots of other practices, but the way I put it together, I think, is unique. And then we'll do it. I'll guide you through it. And then I'm hoping that there'll be time for discussion after I wind up and you can talk about your experience. So deep mind reflection has as its focus what I call a key word or phrase, like many Zen koans, like sun-faced Buddha, or something, and an image. And you bring up that key word and that key image and hold it. You're all meditators, so you should be able to do this pretty well. And watch it and see what happens. And if you watch it for a while, it has a tendency to move and to change. And this is, in the book, I call it intuition. I don't like to use a lot of explicitly Buddhist terms because I don't want to scare away non-Buddhists, but you could say this is your Buddha mind speaking to you or moving you or guiding you toward toward reality. So because it's imaging practice, some of you may find it easier to close your eyes. You don't have to, but like in Zazen, you can half close your eyes to shut out visual distraction. So the key word I'm going to suggest to you is the word illness. Or sickness. You can use sickness, but illness is more specific. It means like COVID. Some of you, if you want, you could use the word COVID because all of us by now have a very strong relationship with that word, or coronavirus. Any of those words will do. So what I would ask you to do is start by repeating silently to yourself, not continuously, but every so often, like every few seconds, like hitting a bell or like turning a potter's wheel. Just give that word a nudge. Illness, illness. Illness is a teaching. Illness is unutterably real. There's no getting around it. If you're ill, you're ill. Many of you may have had major illnesses. Maybe some of you are cancer survivors. Maybe you have loved ones or friends. Illness is close to us. So illness, just bring the word very quietly into consciousness. I'll give you a few minutes to do that. Illness. So keeping the keyword in your mind, repeating it very so often to yourself, bring up an image to go with it. The very first thing that comes to your mind right now. What is it? Everybody will have a picture. Don't censor, don't second guess. It could be something ridiculous, but that's your starting point for your image. For me, what immediately comes to mind is a picture of myself in bed in a coma, dying. I never saw that image, but my wife did. Each of you will have an image. An image of illness. So now you have a word and a picture. Keep the picture in mind. Keep slowly repeating the word and just watch. See if anything happens. See if either the word or the image changes. If it doesn't, that's fine. If it does, you have a new word and maybe a new image. Change with it. It's taking you somewhere. My image of me in bed just changed. I opened my eyes. That actually happened. I was in a coma for 3 weeks and then I opened my eyes. What happens to your image? Anything? Let's take a few more minutes and just rest with this. you could go on longer. You could see if more changes come, but since I'm just demonstrating for now, let's bring the exercise to a close. It's important to dissipate or erase what you've done. So think of the image as maybe something on a blackboard that you can erase, or that it's made of bubbles and let them dissipate into thin air. However it works for you, make the image go away. And then say the keyword one more time with a sense of the original keyword, with a sense of finality, with a period at the end, like this is going to be the last time. So, illness. I'm going to conclude by telling you something that Suzuki Roshi said once in response to a question. He was maybe in his mid-60s. We were all so young, you know. We were in our 20s. A lot of us are 30s. And he was so patient with us. He took us so seriously, and we were kids, you know, hippies. A lot of us came in stoned, you know. It was the 60s. And so somebody raised their hand and said, it was kind of a, I'm not sure how serious a question it was, but it was something to ask. So they said, Suzuki Roshi, why do we do Zazen? And he laughed a lot. And he said, so we can enjoy our old age. What a strange response to a bunch of young people, so we can enjoy our old age. We have to look at that response a little bit to really get how deep it is. You know, most people don't enjoy their old age, at least a good bit of the time. It's hard, and you're not getting younger, and you're going to die, and everybody you love is going to die. Who's going to die first? I mean, that whole world is scary and depressing, even more so now with COVID circulating around. But he said, and he was enjoying his old age. He was not in good health, but he laughed a lot. He enjoyed being with us. He was wonderful company. And what is it, and how is that connected with Zazen? Sitting Zazen so you can enjoy your old age. I think he was really saying something there, but it's taken me, you know, a good 45 years and a couple of really serious illnesses and for me to be older than he was at that time, for me to understand, oh, that was a real teaching. That was something. And I think that, just to conclude, I think that we could also ask, what's the point of Buddha's teaching? Given the world he lived in, a terrible world of suffering and corpses and sickness and death and starvation and famine, that was the world. And it's still the world in some places. And yet you look, I of course, in the meditation, I looked at the statue of the Buddha on your altar. Do you know, you may not realize this, but Buddhas are always smiling. That's an intrinsic part of the iconography of a Buddha. A Buddha is always smiling. How can a Buddha smile in the face of all that he or she, we've got to include women Buddhas, knows about life? How can Buddha enjoy his old age? You know, he left home when he was 30. He was already, by those standards, an old man, and he lived into his 70s. So he lived a long time. I wish I was with you. I wish you're, you know, I could be in your wonderful Zendo. I'd bring my vaccination certificate and we'd sit with you. But, you know, this is okay. A Zoom, I've been doing Zooms for a year, as all of you have. So I'm very glad to be with you. If you want to know more about my work or my books, you can go to my website, lewisrichmond.com. I'm sure somebody there will have more information about connecting with me. But for now, I think I will conclude and open it up for questions. If somebody wants to manage that or organize that, I'm for whatever time you'd like to spend, I'm happy to be here and respond. Thank you.